Hello and welcome to another divorce TV show. Sorry, we're running a little bit late today. We've had some wonderful technical hitches, but hopefully we've had them all up front instead of during the show. So we're going to get started right away. Before I get onto the news though, just to let you know, I've got a special guest today, Ruth, who is an expert in helping you deal with controlling and coercive relationships. And we've got a lovely real live person for Monica coming to talk to us and sharing her shared story. But first, let's have a look at the news. So to start with, the Mirror is telling us about a lavish millionaire who was left penniless by his divorce after moving a Playboy model into his flat. An entrepreneur who moved a Playboy model into his luxury flat is fighting his ex-wife in court, complaining that a divorce judge handed her millions and left him nothing at all, then told him he had brought it on himself. Richard Rothschild and Charmaine de Souza had a 21-year relationship after meeting as students, marrying in 2005, having 2 children and running a thriving West London telecoms business. Now, the pair led a lavish lifestyle, with Mr. Rothschild driving a Lamborghini, while the couple also enjoyed a multi-million-dollar condo in an exclusive Miami Beach apartment block. The pair split in 2016 and first clashed in court in 2018 after Mr. Rothschild moved his then girlfriend, Playboy model Shera Michelle, into the couple's former apartment. Oops. In December last year, divorce judge Mr. Justice Cohen divided their wealth, awarding Mr. Souza, 46, the £1.85 million Park Royal, West London-based mobile phone business they had run together, plus cash and properties worth almost another £1 million. Mr. Rothschild, 45, was given the Miami apartment, which the judge valued at $3 million, but which the husband says is worth far less, leaving him effectively with nothing after paying off family debts. He is now challenging the unfair divorce ruling, as he sees it, at the Court of Appeal, where his lawyers this week said he had been left with, in effect, no capital at all and no income. Barrister Patrick Chamberlain QC told the appeal court that after debts including about £300,000 in lawyers' fees for their divorce fight had been paid, the judge's order left the wife with capital worth £1,760,138, while poor Mr. Rothschild got just £23,938. And he went on to claim that the position in reality was even worse than for the husband, arguing that the judge had overvalued the Miami Beach apartment by £615,000, leaving Mr. Rothschild with nothing at all from the marriage, while his ex-wife got millions. The husband is left with nothing income-wise or capital-wise, and the wife is left with the means to meet all her needs in the forms of this business, the barrister said, because she got the business. He said that the judge had deprived the husband of every penny, everything he had achieved in his 21-year marriage, and left him without any assets or the ability to meet his needs. Mr. Chamberlain argued that the judge had not taken into account Mr. Rothschild's financial needs when he split the couple's wealth, but only the needs of his ex-wife. Mr. Chamberlain urged Lord Justice Patten, Lord Justice Malan and Lord Justice Newey to overturn the divorce judge's order. But for Mr. Souza, Charles Hale QC argued that the judge got it right. He said that the disparity in the incomes for Mr. Rothschild and Mr. Souza could be explained, get this, by the judge having taken into account their children's needs. I love this story because quite often people get into these very expensive, perhaps not quite as expensive as that, battles around what's fair and who has what, and completely forget that the person one of them's got to bring up the children, and that does have a financial bearing on the case. And personally, from my limited experience of these things, I cannot believe that a judge in the British courts would get too personal about such a thing. I'm sure they just looked at the numbers. But well done for trying. But what a lot of money he spent arguing over this case. Just move on to the next story. This one is about Selling Sunsets of Christine Staus, who's from Selling Sunsets. She's opened up about her divorce from This Is Us by Justin Hartley, with saying the split left her feeling traumatised. Now, the third series of the Netflix original, which is due next month, will focus on the 38-year-old's divorce after 2 years from the actor, something which she wasn't expecting and left her feeling blindsided. Unfortunately, she says, I'm in a position where more has been shared than I would have ever chosen, because this was not a choice that I made, Christel said on the Reality with Derek Z podcast, or Z podcast, touching on how it was never her intention for the divorce to take centre stage. Nor was this the timing that I would have chosen while I was filming a show. So I'm already in a position where so much has been shared that I wouldn't have opted for it. It's an embarrassing, humiliating type of thing to go through without cameras and without people judging you. So I just hope people are gentle when they watch. Ahead of the third season, Christel added, we're real people. This was a traumatising time in my life, and it's going to be hard for me to watch it myself. News of the Christel and Justin's divorce broke in November 2019 after 2 years of marriage, with people reporting at the time that he had cited irreconcilable differences as the reason for the divorce. So hopefully it's not too horrible for us. It's difficult for everyone, but I do feel for people who have to do it in the public limelight. Another story from the Mirror. Wanted to talk about this. Killers will be barred from using the rough sex defence in England and Wales after MPs backed an amendment ruling out the controversial trial tactic. People facing criminal charges won't be able to rely on consent for sexual gratification as a defence for causing serious harm. Justice Secretary Robert Buckland welcomed changes to the bill, which included recognition for children as victims of domestic abuse. Now, this is a really important bill that's finally been passed, and there are some significant changes in relation to divorce, which I'll get to in a minute. Now, the bill, which now passes to the House of Lords, seeks to give better protection to those fleeing violence by placing a new legal duty on councils to provide secure homes for them and their children. This is really good news, because there are literally people who have died because they haven't been able to leave that relationship because they've had nowhere to go, and they had their children and would effectively have made themselves homeless. So this is a really, really good thing that's happened. It would also introduce the first legal government definition of domestic abuse, which would include economic abuse and controlling and manipulative non-physical behaviour. Labour's bid to ensure recourse to public funds for migrants who are domestic abuse survivors was defeated by 330 votes to 207, a majority of 123. Of the amendment, Ms Phillips said, humans who, when they have been raped, beaten, controlled and abused, before we ask them how we can help, first we ask them what stamp is in their passport. This cannot be right, and what is more is that the situation as it is today is not only hindering support to victims, it's helping to leave rapists, abusers and violent perpetrators on our streets. And that is a good point. Hackney Gazette pointed out that the Office of National Statistics Domestic Abuse Overview in England and Wales 2019, they reported that women with mixed or multiple ethnicity are more likely to experience partner abuse than any other ethnic group. So it's not perfect, but it is at least heading in the right direction. Owen Mitchell's website pointed out, and this is where we get to where it's quite specific to divorce situations, that they reckon that the bill passed by Parliament this week gives a more joined up approach. Special measures for witnesses giving evidence in court will be provided automatically, such as screens or a video link. It also won't be possible for an alleged perpetrator who is representing themselves in court to directly cross-examine their alleged victim. This is massively good news, because up until now, an alleged victim could directly examine the person they'd been abusing in court, which was not a great state of affairs. Instead, now the court will be able to appoint a legal representative to do this for them. These measures are to be extended to the family court as well, it's to be welcomed, as a recent report has identified systematic failings in the family justice system to understand the impact of abuse and trauma. And just in the interests of balance, I know the picture we've got here of the person representing abuse, someone being abused, is clearly female. But let's not remember, in 2019 alone, an estimated 2.4 million adults aged 16 to 74 had experienced domestic abuse, according to the Crime Survey for England and Wales. 1.6 million were women and 786,000 were men. And I'm now going to bring on the lovely Ruth Driscoll. Thank you, Ruth, for joining us. And we're going to have a little chat. Ruth does fantastic work helping people who are dealing with coercive and controlling relationships. Now, they may be abusive relationships, but as we'll be discussing, and as the law now is beginning to reflect, this can be financial, psychological. It's not an easy thing to deal with, and I'm really interested to know, Ruth, a little bit about what you think about these new developments in the law.
Well, any sort of progress where the law is supporting people who are enduring manipulative, abusive, controlling relationships is obviously going to be a very, very good thing. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean to say it's going to be a straightforward path through, because those people who are suffering manipulative, abusive, controlling relationships still may be very reluctant to go forward in court, and that's because of the fears that they are facing. But at least now we are having a law that acknowledges that abuse is a lot more than a physical abuse, and that that emotional, controlling behaviors, control of the finances, control of your lifestyle, all of those things that really squash somebody's life and stop them from fulfilling and being the person that they truly are.
And how did you get into doing this? Because it's not the kind of job that most people would fall into. What led to it?
Well, that was life throwing a curveball in the sense that I myself was living with a manipulative, abusive, controlling partner. And the sort of dichotomy around that is that at the time that this was happening, I was the head teacher of a large and challenging inner city primary school. So I was dealing with sort of very difficult situations every day, dealing with supporting children and parents as well through bullying behaviors, helping people to be able to understand how better choices can be made around the way to handle things. So, it is that sort of strange dichotomy. But what happened to me as a result of being in this abusive relationship was that, as often happens when you're in incredibly stressful situations, my health suffered, and the net result of that was that I had to, I felt the sensible decision was to resign from my position as head teacher, which was a very, very difficult decision to have to make, because it was a job that I loved and valued the difference that I was able to make in people's lives. But then I was left in that position of thinking, well, what do I do now? And it was kind of because of that I realized, with my background in education, with the personal experience that I'd been through and who I was as a person, that I was kind of perfectly placed to be able to support others who have been through this. And of course, with a great understanding of how this affects children along the way as well. and understanding the difference that cultural backgrounds can make, because it was a very culturally diverse school where I was head teacher.
Because being a lot of people can be very judgmental. It's very much the abuser is a terrible person, but actually, if you've got to co-parent with that person, um, it's a complex thing to manage, and which is why I'm so glad you're a member of the Alternative Divorce Directory, because we've definitely had to have a few conversations with a few of the people that we support, particularly in the Secret Divorce group. So, what's your approach that you have? Because I get the impression it's quite an empowering one.
Yes, this is because somebody who's in that situation, they have the belief that it's hopeless. You can't talk. That person won't reason with you. They may be ignoring completely the things that you're saying, ignoring letters, emails, even from solicitors. So all of those things have a great impact on your stress levels. But the way that I support people is getting them to understand exactly what's happening in the dynamic of this conversation, and then how can they successfully handle communication so that they get much more of the outcomes that are desirable here. And so there are strategies. I call it elegant assertiveness, because it's being able to put your point of view across, but put it across in a way that doesn't cause additional conflict, stops the manipulative tactics that the other person is trying to completely dislodge and discombobulate the whole conversation with. Because remember, all that confusion that they are creating means that they're delaying. They're delaying the decisions. They're delaying the whole process, which, when you are a controlling person, it's just part and parcel of the way that they are. They need to control everything, even if it doesn't make a blind bit of sense. That's what's so frustrating, because it's so irrational. But what I support people to be able to do is to be able to hold very successful conversations. And part and parcel of that is being able to really maintain control of your emotional state, because that's often what tips it over, that you get upset, you get angry, you end up behaving in a way that really isn't you as a person. So it's important that you're able to stay as the person you are, that you're able to put your point of view across effectively, and stand a much better chance of being able to create a dialogue that is calm and successful. And especially if you are going to co-parent, essential for the well-being not just of you but of your children as well.
I'm going to ask you one last question, but first, viewers will see a QR code, and if they click on that or put their phone on it on camera, it will magically open up. Where will it take them, and what will they get?
This will take them to my diary, and if they would like a free chat with me, consultation with me, then they're very welcome to click and book an appointment with me, and I will then get in touch, and we'll connect, probably over a Zoom call, because it's nice to be able to see people face to face. And you'll be able to just tell me what's going on, what's causing the frustrations and the challenges for you as you're going through this divorce process.
That's brilliant, thanks. And obviously that's a very generous offer for you to make for people watching the show. Just a last question. What is it that people often are telling themselves that stops them making that call to you? What is it that, because people often wonder why people stay in these situations, women and men, for so long. What is it that the myth that people tell themselves, that they need to realise that it is a myth and actually they do need to seek some help?
Yes, it's because with the patterns of your interaction with that person, particularly if that's a controlling or manipulative person, you don't believe it's possible to be able to make change. But I promise you, I do have magic dust that I can sprinkle and make sure that completely changes. And it can happen quite quickly.
That's lovely. Thank you so much, Ruth. And when I'll tag you in when we're out on all the different channels, and I know that you'll be able to put a link version of that. So if you can't manage the QR code, everyone, don't panic. You'll be able to access Ruth through the broadcast. But later on today, or this evening, I'll make sure they're on there. Thank you so much, Ruth, and I look forward to seeing you on later programmes. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So we're now moving to a short bit of learning. And then after that, we will have our shared story, which is always one of my most favourite parts. So get your learning caps on. I'm just going to finish off what I was working on, going through with you last week, which is the part of the divorce first aid. It's in the divorce masterclass, which is the divorce discovery voyage, which you can access, still get the whole first section at no cost if you use that QR code and go in through there. So part 2, there was just so much of this part, I didn't want to squash it all into last week. So let's just finish off with this. Now, the current difference in costs between a non-adversarial divorce in the UK and one that becomes adversarial, I made an estimate. I did this a few years ago, but even if the prices might have changed a little bit, the ratios, I dare say, will be the same. So I worked out that it can cost you about £65,000 more at least if you decide to go to court, at least, than if you decide to have a more peaceful route. And I don't mean just you decide over the kitchen table. I mean where you do still need to pay for professional and expert help. And of course £65,000 plus, that could be much better spent on university fees for the children, or just building a new life. So I became a bit concerned about what I saw as a fluffy image of stay out of court routes through family breakup and the myths that surround them. So I thought it's good to put some numbers on it. And I wasn't getting a very straight answer from the lawyers about the cost differences, because it can be complicated and they like to be very precise about things. So I did my own estimates. And I looked at mediation and collaborative divorce and compared them to the adversarial route of going through the courts. I also wanted to bust some of the big myths about adversarial divorce being the best way to get a more favourable divorce settlement, because of course that is absolutely not true. Clear evidence from mediation studies on the harm adversarial divorce does to children in the long term seems to be not getting through to the public either, nor the financial benefits of avoiding adversarial lawyers. So I added up the cost range of an adversarial divorce by taking the average cost of a London divorce. Novitas helpfully calculated this. They worked out that the average cost in London just to pay the solicitors is £40,000 for each set of solicitors' fees. So that's £80,000 for the couple in legal fees alone, coming out of the mutual pot. I then looked at the collaborative divorce costs, and I took a journalist, Martha Roberts, who wrote about her happy divorce in the Daily Mail, of £15,000. Now this is way more than the normal collaborative divorce, which can often be as little as £1,500, but it all depends on how complex the financial arrangements are and how many sessions it takes for the couple to agree on a settlement. But I chose this higher figure as I wanted to give adversarial divorce a fair run for its money, and even on this basis the difference in cost is £65,000. Now, mediation is much less expensive still, as no lawyers need to be present at the meetings, and the costs are usually between £500 and £3,000 for a mediated divorce. Estimates on the average cost of a divorce in the US range from £15,000 to £30,000. But just looking at the numbers is not giving a realistic view of the situation. Mediation and collaborative law can seem tougher to couples who don't want to sit in the same room with each other, and even knowing the harm done to their children if they become adversarial is not always enough to stop them going down that route. The Mishcon-Dorea study showed that parents are willing to drag their kids through the divorce process even when they acknowledge it harms the children. People need to get the necessary support and help to navigate a stay out of court journey. But what kind of support? So I suggest that it can be as simple as dealing with depression and anger, which is not, it's a very dangerous thing to fuel your divorce with depression and anger. It doesn't bring out the best in you, but you can deal with that not just through going to counselling or a life coach, but joining a gym, getting a personal trainer. You can work with parenting experts. You can investigate startup business opportunities, because that can reduce the fear of lack of income post-divorce. Working with a financial coach and a financial planner to create a detailed and accurate financial plan for both parents, including who will cover university fees and how much they can afford to spend on cars and holidays over the ensuing years without running out of money. None of these are the job of a traditional divorce lawyer. Now, it may sound like a lot of different experts compared to just using 2 adversarial lawyers. I do admit that. But think of it this way. If you pay to use mediation plus a whole host of useful experts who will help you complete the process successfully, you will have learned and gained a great deal from going through the process and still saved yourself at least £65,000 in lawyer's fees. From an anonymous source comes the quote, "Love is grand. Divorce is 100 grand. Now we're going to talk about shared stories, so get ready. And the lovely Monica, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing your amazing story. I think it's amazing because I love not necessarily positive, but I love stories where you're dealing with divorce is taking you from one place to another. It's been a real transition. Was that a fair description of what's happened to you?
Hi, Susie. Good evening. Yes, indeed. It's a very accurate description of what happened to me at this.
And you are, just before, people will see that on the screen that you are a diamond specialist. Now, diamonds are, at the end, I was going to ask you what happened to you with your divorce, a little bit about your story. But just before we do that, how have diamonds been important to you in your life? It's not just your profession, it really is your love, isn't it?
It is. It's been a love since a young age. I was fortunate to be born in a family of diamond dealers and jewelry makers. So I grew up with them, and they became a part of at the end.
And I believe you, when you I know that you take jewelry sometimes, and you're a designer, and that you can redesign. So that's often an issue with divorce, isn't it? People have a diamond ring, and they don't want to get rid of it just because they're no longer engaged or no longer married. What kind of what suggestions have you had, and what did you do in the case of your own divorce?
Well, I got divorced many years ago, and I had an engagement ring. It was a pretty one, and I thought it would have been a total waste if I store it into my safety deposit box. And I thought long enough, and then I decided that I should, as I was transforming into something new, I should have transformed my engagement ring into something that would have been an expression of who I was becoming. And so, well, I had a little bit of an advantage because I am in the business and I design jewelry for a living as well. And I sat down and I started thinking, well, shall I wear it again as a ring and transform it into a cocktail ring, or shall I do something else? And at the end, I decided that the best way to utilize the stone would have been to create a pendant. And it's something I wear almost every day, and I have it on today. And so I sat down and I made some sketches, and then I consulted with my craftsman, and we created a beautiful piece, which was a statement of my new life, and also the fact that I was using something that was there at my disposal, and I made it into something completely new, completely different. Nobody would have known unless I told them the story that this was the diamond set in my engagement ring.
That's so beautiful, and I love that sort of sense of sort of symbolic transformation. Oh, have you? Have I? Somehow my microphone's disappeared off. Here we go. Can you hear me now? There we are.
Yes,
Sorry
I
about
can.
that. And I'm back again. So that's a lovely story. Thank you. And with, I know it was a while ago, but for you, what did divorce represent? Because you didn't just leave, separate from your husband. You moved countries, didn't you?
Yes, it was a peaceful divorce. We, followed love at the end. And we were sort of after before turning the divorce into an unpleasant journey, we decided that it would have been better to separate and get through the divorce, and so we did. And during that process, I did something that I will never forget. I'm quite a organized and logical individual, and rational, very rational. So I sat down and I thought I should write the pros and cons, what is good and what is not. And it ended up being the list of the good very, very long, and the list of the bad very, very short. And one of the things was like, I'm a woman in the 21st century, so I can get divorced without being a stigma or wherever people saying, oh, you are a divorcee, what's wrong with you, and so on and so forth. Another thing was, I'm independent. I can live and work wherever I like on the entire planet. And I run a business. I can move this business wherever I like. And for different reasons, at the end, I decided to move from the States back to Europe, where I'm originally from. And that was the best decision ever. And I built a new life, and the transformation that I was mentioning earlier became a huge transformation. And the fact that, you always have to look at the positive. And I think this is key in any circumstances, because if you focus only on the negative, you will whirlpool into this vicious, bad, vibes and energy. While if you focus on the positive, I think that you can get so much more out of it. And I think that helped me at the end. And of course, the support of the family and friends. So this is my little story about the divorce, which was so long ago, but it's part of my life. At the same time, this is a new life. It's like a new chapter. And I don't deny that at all, because it brought me where I am today. And that was a gift. And
that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And just the final thing I'd love you to share is for those who are looking at their wedding rings and thinking, what do I do with it, because I'm going to divorce, have you got any inspirational ideas for them?
So you can do a lot of things. Of course, it will depend on the type of diamond you have at your disposal. And, you can make it, again, into a pendant. You can make it into a cocktail ring. You can make a lovely brooch to wear on your coat or your jacket. A more extravagant thing, you can make something for your hair. But today is not that fashionable, even though I love, hairpiece. And, you can make it into a lot of things. And it depends also if it's a solitaire, so one diamond or one stone, or if your engagement ring is made of multiple stones. So there are a lot of options and variations and way of utilizing what you have. And I'm very happy if anyone wants to have a chat. They are more than happy to, if they want to get in touch with me, to have a consultation via Zoom and discuss eventually the possibilities. And then we can take it from there.
Can you help them with gold as well, like if they've got golden wedding ring?
Yes. So sometimes I help clients who have multiple jewelry, which are old-fashioned, broken, not loved sometimes, or sometimes you have an inheritance and it's not exactly your style, so you won't be happy to wear that jewelry in that particular fashion. So you can bring on few pieces if you have, and we can melt down the metal, can be gold, platinum, whatever it is, unset the gems, and then work out what we can do with them all together. It's a collaborative journey. It's not just me dictating what you should do. It's usually me understanding who you are, where you're going, and then eventually through those all information and conversation creating something that is a reflection of who you are at the end.
Fabulous, thank you so much, and I'll make sure I tag you in on the broadcast so you can add a link so people can contact you if they need to. And thank you very, very much for sharing your story, Monica. Bye for now.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. So now we're going to just have a very brief roundup because I'm running way over, but when people are interesting I don't like to cut it short. So get your phones ready. Here we've got very exciting news. Next week I should be able to tell you the actual date of the next financial workshop. We're definitely doing one in September, just waiting for confirmation from the law firm who are sponsoring it. But if you use this QR code, go into the waiting list area, then you'll be not only the first to know, but you'll also get a special code that means you make it you'll literally pay £20 to come on the workshop, and they're incredibly useful. They are online, so through Zoom, so very, very accessible. These ones are really designed for people in the UK having a UK divorce, though if you are a law firm in the US, do please contact me because I'd love to run one there too. Here is the Best Way to Divorce Facebook group. It's a free group. There's over 650 people in it from the UK, US, South Africa, lots of places. But come on in and it's very supportive, and you can share and get access to information through there. And this is the Growing Secret Divorce group. This is not on Facebook. It's a much smaller group, a bit more exclusive, you might say, but still very low cost. It's only £15 a month, and you get 30 days for free. I like to keep things accessible. This is the place if you've got questions for me and you want my attention, or you want to talk to Ruth, who was on earlier, you will find us in there, and that's our little gang, our club, and they're a lovely bunch in there, really, really supportive people who are going through all different kinds of divorces, but they're all beautiful and you'll really like them. So come on and join in there. If you use this QR code, you can get 30 days for free. And what we're going to do now is go to our healing. This time I didn't have someone to give a healing as such, so I thought I'd just do something different. I found an old story that I'd written ages ago and just added some pictures to it and a little bit of music, and I call this a healing story. So sit back and enjoy. The ogre lived alone on the top of the mountain, and it seemed always to have been that way. He would go out drinking with his mates and play cards and pinch the bottoms of tired waitresses too numb from boredom to complain. And as far as ogres go, he seemed pretty happy. But one night the ogre fell asleep by the deep green sea, full of wine and fried food, and snored so loudly that he awoke a mermaid who was trying to catch up on her beauty sleep. The mermaid thrust her head above the waves and glared at the ogre, swishing her tail behind her like an irritated cat. Even in the soft glow of the moonlight, her beauty could be seen to have faded as the years of salt water and sharp sand had etched her features deeper, and her limpid eyes had a far-away look that could have been mistaken for sadness. The ogre shook so violently with his own snoring that he woke himself up and dazed stared out ahead of him, his creased old eyes slowly focusing first upon a beautiful crescent moon, then upon a splattering of silver stars, and finally upon the angry-looking mermaid. "I should have guessed it would be you," muttered the mermaid with a hint of softness in her voice. "You always did snore like a dragon." The ogre couldn't help but smile. "How are you, beautiful?" he laughed. I have dreamed about you so many nights, and now you are here again in my dreams. That wine was stronger than I thought." "You're not dreaming, you foolish old man," snapped the mermaid. The ogre's breathing slowed, and he sat upright so he could get a better look at the mermaid. "You have aged," he said slowly. She laughed, tossed her golden seaweed locks and splashed her tail so hard she sent spray shooting over the ogre's face. He wiped the salt water from his eyes and blinked. Suddenly, the salt water became tears that dropped from his large brown eyes, and his mouth quivered. "You were right to leave me on my mountain," he stammered. "I am old now too, and my life is unsurprising and full of mediocrity. Not how it would have been with you, my love. But each day, when I stare out at the green sea, I thank the stars that I let you free to be without me, as a burden to your life. You will have fared far better alone without me." The mermaid folded her arms and put her head on one side thoughtfully. "And how is that so?" "I am fat and ugly," replied the ogre. "There were times with you that I felt fit and handsome, but I was always going to fall prey to those delicious currant buns in Mrs. McGinty's cake shop, and my big nose and huge crooked teeth were always going to be the first thing that anyone noticed about me." "That's true," replied the mermaid calmly, with a slight smile. "And I was always so unreliable," continued the ogre, wiping away another salty tear with his large chubby hands. "I still am, of course. I'd make a promise and then somehow I just couldn't seem to make it happen, even though I tried and tried, and I couldn't bear to keep letting you down and disappointing you. Why should you have to put up with that?" "I shouldn't," replied the mermaid. "So you have made a better life now?" asked the ogre, though his question was tinged with regret, and he turned his head to stare again at the moon as if he didn't really want to hear an answer. "You silly old fool," laughed the mermaid. "Yes, you are fat, and your nose is big and cavernous enough to house a family of mice, and your teeth are crooked as ancient tombstones. And you are indeed a most unreliable fellow. Many times you would decide on some grand plan that would be almost impossible to achieve, and set forth with such enthusiasm. If only, if only," the mermaid's voice trailed away with a gust of wind that tousled her hair, and the ogre could remember how it had felt when he would put his big fingers into her hair and squeeze out the seawater and smelt the salty spray. "You see," he cried out suddenly, "you see, I was right to go back up onto the mountain and to leave you to swim free in the big green sea." "You silly old fool," laughed the mermaid again. "That unreliable man that you speak of was the man who brought adventure and excitement into my life. That large belly was where I laid my tired head to rest. Those big thick hands squeezed seawater out of my tangled locks. Those crooked teeth were the gatekeepers to a mouth that could kiss with such sweet softness and utter words of deepest love and tenderness. Those giant clumsy arms would hold me and make me feel safer than any place on land or sea." The mermaid turned her back on the ogre and smashed her tail into the sea so that he was covered in cold, salty spray. He stood up shakily, brushing the water out of his face. She turned to him once more and smiled. "That person you so dislike, that man you've saved me from, that was the man I fell in love with. But it is not enough for one person to love another. You needed to love yourself too. And I see you still have not learned that lesson." As the mermaid swam out to sea, in search of her supper, she sang a ditty that lay suspended in the air like the smell of fish hangs on the breeze once the fishing boats have left the harbour. The ogre listened hard and could just make out the words, "I loved you, I loved you, I love you, you silly old fool. Bit of a sad one. Have you ever been in a relationship like that? I shared that because often we do, when we're dealing with our exes, it's really important to remember why we were with them in the first place, not to demonise them. And quite often they'll think about themselves as harshly, more harshly than we do. So, on the battlefield of divorce, in the war of family separation, always, always make peace your weapon of choice.